The Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Freedom from Worry. Introduction. Envision your psyche as a ceaselessly evolving metropolis. Worries manifest as gridlocked thoroughfares, self-doubt flares like garish digital advertisements, and an incessant news feed broadcasts the minutiae of others' lives, their thoughts, their judgments. This relentless internal clamor, this perpetual recalibration to the perceived opinions of the world is not merely enervating, it is a deliberate theft of your joy, your tranquility, and your untapped potential. We are adrift in an ocean of superfluous anxieties, squandering our most precious mental and emotional capital on matters that hold no true consequence in the grand tapestry of existence. This is the pervasive malady of excessive fuck-giving, a bondage that ensnares millions. You have likely encountered the sentiment, perhaps even felt its resonance deep within, that we fret disproportionately over the opinions of others. This is not mere intuition, it is a documented cognitive bias known as the spotlight effect. We navigate the world under the deluded impression that we are the focal point of universal attention, that every misstep, every awkward utterance, every sartorial faux pas is subjected to the scrutiny of an eager, observant throng. Yet, the stark, magnificent truth, as David Foster Wallace so eloquently articulated it, is this: you will stop worrying so much what other people think about you when you realize how seldom they do. The unvarnished reality is that most individuals are far too preoccupied with their own perceived imperfections and embarrassing moments to dedicate significant cognitive bandwidth to yours. Indeed, research suggests that the dread of public humiliation often eclipses the fear of death itself. Ponder this for a moment. We are more terrified of appearing foolish than of, well, ceasing to exist. This primal fear propels us into a performance paradigm, wherein we contort ourselves into ersatz beings, all in a desperate, often futile, pursuit of validation that is rarely even solicited. This is precisely where the liberating efficacy of not giving a fuck intervenes. But before your mind conjures an image of a nihilistic, indifferent slacker, let us establish an unassailable clarity. This is not a mandate for boorishness or callousness. Not giving a fuck is a philosophy, a disciplined practice dedicated to the intentional curtailment of mental and emotional expenditure on matters that hold no genuine import or lie beyond our sphere of influence. It is the astute recognition of the spotlight effect as the artifice it is. It is the essence of strategic prioritization. Conceive of your fucks as a finite fiscal resource. You cannot disperse them indiscriminately. You must judiciously select where their value is most profoundly realized. This philosophy champions the judicious deployment of your precious emotional currency, investing it in pursuits that authentically resonate with your core values and foster your well-being, rather than hemorrhaging it on the ephemeral pronouncements of strangers or the spectral judgments of acquaintances. To embrace this discipline is to confront, with unblinking resolve, the deeply entrenched fear of embarrassment and rejection. It necessitates the profound understanding that mastery in any domain, be it a craft, a relationship, or the simple act of authentic self-expression, commences with an initial, often spectacular, ineptitude. One must cultivate a willingness to falter, to appear absurd, to fail with flamboyant abandon. The capacity to tolerate embarrassment is the bedrock upon which the principle of not giving a fuck is built. It is the shedding of the burdensome mantle of performance, the final emancipation of the authentic self. This is the genesis of genuine internal liberation, a freedom that emanates from within, impervious to external circumstances or the fickle winds of validation. It is the exquisite, unadulterated savor of knowing that your intrinsic worth is not contingent upon the estimations of others. So, what vistas unfold on this chosen path? Imagine an existence where the incessant thrum of anxiety yields to a serene self-assurance. Picture yourself charting a course toward your aspirations with unyielding courage, unburdened by the specter of judgment. Envision connections with others that are imbued with a deeper, more profound authenticity, for you are finally present in your unvarnished truth. This volume serves as your cartographer, guiding you in the reclamation of your mental dominion, facilitating a strategic disengagement from the cacophony and ultimately enabling you to inhabit a life of profound lightness. The time has arrived to cease expending your precious fucks on the inconsequential, and to commence investing them wholeheartedly in that which truly matters. On what are you currently squandering your most valuable fucks? Let us embark on this inquiry, and then let us commence their reclamation. Chapter 1. Understanding the Art. 1. The philosophy of not giving a fuck. Let us clarify one pivotal point from the outset. The phrase not giving a fuck can, at first blush, evoke an image of utter indifference, a specter of apathy, haunting the periphery of existence. It may suggest a persona akin to a listless automaton passively adrift. However, this interpretation is profoundly misguided, a gross distortion of its true essence. This is not about calcifying the spirit into an emotionless husk. Rather, it is about unlocking a far more potent form of agency, a mechanism that bestows not less, but more, dominion over one's life. At its core, the philosophy of not giving a fuck is a radical act of deliberate selection. It is the conscious, unwavering decision regarding the allocation of your finite mental and emotional capital. Conceive of your energy as a meticulously managed budget. Each day, you are allotted a specific sum. The prevailing human condition often witnesses this precious resource squandered on trifles, matters utterly beyond our purview, or concerns that possess significance only by the ephemeral decree of perceived societal approval. This philosophy is a resounding declaration of enough. It is the assertive reclamation of that budget, the decisive pronouncement, this, and this alone, commands my genuine regard. Herein shall my energies be invested. It merits not a single fuck. This stands in stark antithesis to apathy. Apathy is a languid surrender, a state of passive resignation where meaning itself seems to have evaporated, prompting a cessation of all effort. It is a cul-de-sac. Not giving a fuck, conversely, is an dynamic, engaged undertaking. It necessitates introspection, discernment, and decisive action, all calibrated to resonate with your intrinsic values, not the borrowed dictates of others. It is the profound act of repossessing your own volition. Imagine canceling a defunct subscription service. This is not a passive oversight, it is an active, intentional cancellation, a deliberate choice made. So, what, then, is truly worthy of our fervent attention? This is the quintessential inquiry, and its answer resides within the unique architecture of each individual soul. It is the pursuit of that which harmonizes with your foundational beliefs, your personal aspirations, and the wellsprings of your authentic fulfillment. It encompasses your physical well-being, the intricate tapestry of your closest relationships, the relentless pursuit of self-mastery, and the passions that ignite your spirit. These are the domains that rightfully demand your undivided focus, your complete emotional investment. When these vital arenas are saturated with your fucks, none remain to be squandered on the inconsequential. The most insidious thief of our precious fucks is our deeply ingrained yearning for external affirmation. We are, by our very nature, wired for approval. This is, in essence, a vestige of our evolutionary past. For millennia, ostracization from the collective meant certain demise. Consequently, we honed our sensitivity to the tribe's collective gaze. In the contemporary world, however, this primal instinct often spirals into dysfunction. We perpetually scan our surroundings, seeking validation, questioning our adequacy, our likability. This is where the insidious psychological phenomenon known as the spotlight effect exacts its toll. It is a profound illusion that convinces us we are perpetually under the intense scrutiny of others, our every transgression, magnified and judged with an acuity far exceeding reality. Recall that mortifying incident from last week? The one you've replayed incessantly in your mind? The unvarnished truth is that the vast majority either remained oblivious or, if they noticed, have long since relegated it to the archives of their own equally embarrassing recollections. They, too, are bathed in their own personal spotlight. We enter a room, and the sensation is akin to standing beneath a blinding, colossal spotlight. Every aspect of our presentation, our attire, our coiffure, our vocal cadence, our potential missteps, subjected to relentless examination. We inflate the degree to which others observe us by an astonishing margin. This persistent, imagined scrutiny breeds anxiety, engenders self-consciousness, and compels us to perform. We begin to inhabit our lives as if on a grand stage, desperately soliciting a standing ovation from an audience whose attention is predominantly consumed by the ephemeral glow of their mobile devices. This is the tyranny of external validation, a self-imposed prison fortified by the dread of what others might deem unacceptable. We self-censor, we retreat, we opt for caution, all paralyzed by the phantom whisper of disapproval. We become so consumed with contorting ourselves into the mold of others' expectations that we forfeit the very essence of who we are. We devolve into hollowed-out effigies, desperately soliciting a perfunctory nod from individuals whose judgments, in the grand cosmic calculus, hold negligible sway over our own well-being. Comprehending these psychological underpinnings, our innate drive for belonging, amplified by the illusory spotlight, is an immensely liberating revelation. It is akin to discerning the puppeteer's strings. Once perceived, their power to manipulate dissolves. When the realization dawns that the majority are far too absorbed in their own narratives to offer more than a fleeting thought, and that even if judgment is cast, it does not diminish your capacity for a life well lived, then the dominion they once held over you begins to dissipate. The subsequent cornerstone of this philosophy lies in the courageous embrace of discomfort. This is where the journey becomes both exhilarating and profoundly demanding. From our earliest moments, we are conditioned to recoil from pain, from embarrassment, from failure. We perceive these as definitive indicators of defeat. But what if they are, in fact, markers of advancement? What if the very moments that induce the most acute squirming are precisely those that foster the most profound growth? The art of not giving a fuck necessitates the acceptance that embarrassment and the potential for failure are not merely possibilities, but inevitabilities. Life is inherently untidy. You will err. You will utter ill-chosen words. You will embark upon new endeavors and fall spectacularly short. And this is not merely permissible, it is in fact essential. If you are never embarrassed, you are likely not venturing beyond the comfortable confines of your established zone, a sanctuary that, while safe, offers scant fertile ground for genuine development. Consider the acquisition of any new skill. When you first grapple with a musical instrument, your attempts may resemble the lamentations of a wounded creature. When you venture into the realm of complex culinary arts, the kitchen itself may become a casualty. When you first attempt to converse in a foreign tongue, each utterance may be fraught with hesitation. This initial awkwardness, this potential for public mortification, is the very impediment that dissuades many from even commencing. However, if you can cultivate a tolerance for this discomfort, if you can declare, yes, I will likely be abysmal at this for a considerable duration, and I accept this, then an expansive vista of possibilities unfurls before you. The willingness to be unapologetically incompetent at something is a direct manifestation of not giving a fuck. It is a profound declaration that your ardor for learning and experiencing eclipses your apprehension of appearing foolish. It is the deliberate decoupling of your self-worth from your performance metrics. Your intrinsic value as a human being does not diminish when you miss a high note or when your inaugural attempt at knitting devolves into an intractable knot. As you begin to integrate this discomfort, a palpable transformation occurs. The specter of embarrassment relinquishes its grip. It is analogous to confronting a formidable adversary. The more vigorously you retreat, the more colossal and menacing it appears. Yet, when you turn to face it, you often discover it to be far less terrifying than initially conceived, perhaps even somewhat pitiable. The dread of appearing inept is frequently a far more formidable foe in the theater of the mind than in the arena of reality. By consciously choosing to divest ourselves of concern for the opinions of others, we finally carve out the necessary space to reclaim our personal values and live with unvarnished authenticity. When we cease our perpetual striving to meet external benchmarks, we can finally attune ourselves to our internal compass. What truly resonates with you? What imbues you with a sense of vitality? What kind of individual do you aspire to become? This represents a profound metamorphosis from a life predicated on performance to one grounded in authenticity. In a performance-driven existence, one is perpetually enacting a role, soliciting accolades, and striving for external admiration. Relationships tend to be transactional, contingent upon one's offerings or the egoic boost they provide to others. In an authenticity-driven life, you present yourself as you are. Perfection is not the aim. Flaws are acknowledged, but you remain genuine. You permit yourself vulnerability, and in doing so, you attract individuals who appreciate and cherish your true essence, not the facade you may have constructed. This may necessitate the relinquishment of certain attachments, friendships, ambitions, societal expectations that no longer align with your authentic self. This can be daunting, akin to stepping off a well-trodden path into uncharted territory. Yet, the reward is immeasurable. A life imbued with purpose, integrity, and a profound sense of inner tranquility. You cease the anxious pursuit of external validation and, instead, cultivate it from within. You cease seeking to be chosen and begin to choose yourself. To summarize, the act of not giving a fuck is not an embrace of apathy. It is a fierce, intentional stewardship of your energetic resources. It is the recognition that the spotlight effect is a fallacy and that the majority of individuals are far less preoccupied with your perceived flaws than you imagine. It is the understanding that discomfort and embarrassment are not adversaries, but rather indispensable catalysts for growth. Ultimately, it is the liberation to forge a life that is authentically, unequivocally your own, guided by your internal compass, rather than the capricious winds of external opinion. Having thus established the philosophical bedrock for the judicious allocation of our fucks, the ensuing imperative is to apprehend this philosophy not as a mere intellectual construct, but as a tangible discipline requiring assiduous cultivation. The art of not giving a fuck is, in essence, the mastery of our internal responses to external stimuli, a process that commences with confronting the very anxieties that hold us in their thrall. 2. Spotlight effect and social anxiety. We move through the world under the potent delusion that we are the protagonists of a grand cinematic production, perpetually, under the gaze of an unseen, multitudinous audience scrutinizing our every gesture. Each clumsy step, each misspoken word, each laugh that rings a decibel too loud feels as though it's being broadcast in high definition to every soul we've ever encountered, and even those unknown to us. This, dear reader, is the tyranny of the perceived spotlight. Consider the scenario: you are at a gathering, or perhaps simply navigating the urban current. A stumble, a minor spill of coffee upon your attire, and instantly your inner monologue erupts. Everyone saw that. They are all dissecting you. They deem you a bumbling simpleton. A hot flush invades your cheeks, your stomach constricts, and an overwhelming urge to vanish into the very earth consumes you. You are convinced that this singular moment has irrevocably cemented your reputation as the century's preeminent klutz. Yet, here lies the profound revelation. That searing, incandescent spotlight you feel? It is, in essence, a phantom of your own making. This psychological phenomenon, termed the spotlight effect, is a sophisticated label for a simple, yet profoundly liberating truth. We possess a pervasive tendency to overestimate the degree to which others attend to us. We harbor the conviction that our actions, our appearance, and particularly our missteps are far more conspicuous to onlookers than they demonstrably are. The genesis of this tendency is elegantly straightforward. We are, by the very nature of our existence, the central figures in the narrative of our own lives. Our thoughts, our emotions, our lived experiences occupy the paramount position within our consciousness, unceasingly. It is therefore an intuitive leap to assume that the internal landscapes of others are similarly preoccupied with us. So deeply immersed are we in the awareness of our own perceived imperfections and triumphs that we instinctively project this same level of scrutiny onto everyone else. We operate under the assumption that they are vigilant observers, meticulously dissecting and cataloging our every action, much as we believe we are doing to them. Visualize this. You are positioned upon a stage bathed in the singular, blinding beam of a spotlight. The audience beyond its fierce glare is rendered indistinct. Every movement you make feels amplified, magnified. Now transpose this image to the canvas of your everyday existence. That spotlight represents your own pervasive self-consciousness. In stark contrast, reality often resembles a dimly illuminated chamber. The vast majority of individuals are ensnared by the complexities of their own lives, their own anxieties, their own internal dialogues. They may cast a fleeting glance in your direction, they might register something momentarily, but they are not poised with notepads, assiduously documenting your every perceived faux pas. They are far too absorbed in their own potential spills, their own awkward encounters, their own imagined judgments. This pervasive illusion of the spotlight serves as the very engine that propels much of our social apprehension. Social anxiety is not merely a discomfort in the presence of others, it is fundamentally rooted in the dread of negative evaluation from those very individuals. We are paralyzed by the terror of being perceived as deficient, foolish, or undesirable. The spotlight effect exacerbates this fear by fostering the belief that any perceived flaw will be observed, will be judged, and will precipitate significant adverse repercussions. Our minds then embark on the construction of elaborate, often catastrophic, narratives. Should I falter in my speech, they will undoubtedly conclude I am unlettered. Should I don this particular garment, they will surely deem my taste abysmal. Should I be unable to furnish an answer to that query, they will instantly perceive me as incompetent. These are not ephemeral thoughts. They ossify into deeply ingrained convictions that dictate the very fabric of our behavior. We become hypervigilant, perpetually scanning for indications of disapproval, interpreting neutral facial expressions as pronouncements of judgment, and subsequently dissecting every interaction, seeking validation for our most profound fears. This ceaseless state of hypervigilance is profoundly enervating. It precipitates avoidance behaviors. We may eschew social engagements, shy away from public discourse, or remain reticent in professional settings, all in a bid to avert the dreaded exposure. It compels us to overanalyze every social encounter, dissecting each utterance and gesture for hidden import. And ultimately, it engenders a profound deficit in authenticity, for we are so consumed with the performance of an idealized persona that we forfeit the capacity for genuine self-expression. The esteemed writer David Foster Wallace, a soul who grappled with his own formidable inner demons, articulated a sentiment that pierces directly to the heart of this matter. You will stop worrying so much what other people think about you when you realize how seldom they do. Let that profound statement resonate. How seldom they do. This is not a nihilistic dismissal of human connection, nor an absolution for egregious conduct. Rather, it is a penetrating observation regarding the actual dynamics of human attention. The majority of individuals are not fixated upon you. They are not perpetually assessing your inherent worth. For the most part, they are immersed in the intricate tapestry of their own existence. They possess their own insecurities, their own aspirations, their own pressing agendas. When this truth is genuinely internalized, it is akin to the breaching of a formidable dam. The accumulated pressure that has been building for years begins to dissipate. You commence to grasp that the relentless critic you so assiduously strive to placate is largely an ephemeral construct. The judgments you so fervently dread are frequently projections of your own inner arbiter. What then is the ultimate cost of perpetuating this illusion? It is immeasurable. We forfeit extraordinary opportunities, paralyzed by the apprehension of exposure. We stifle our creative impulses, haunted by the specter of others' opinions. Our relationships can become strained, as we are not genuinely present, perpetually preoccupied with our outward presentation. We inhabit a world of muted hues, hesitant to embrace the full spectrum of experience due to the perceived peril of embarrassment. This ceaseless preoccupation relentlessly drains our mental and emotional reserves. Reflect upon the countless hours spent agonizing over a social interaction, replaying a conversation, or rehearsing an imagined rejoinder. This is precious energy that could have been channeled into acquiring a new skill, pursuing a cherished passion, fostering deeper connections with loved ones, or simply savoring a moment of tranquil repose. It is energy that is, quite literally, squandered on a perceived predicament that, in its vast majority, exists only within the confines of our own minds. Consider Garrett. Garrett was once a captive of the perceived spotlight. He would meticulously dissect every social encounter, convinced that all eyes were upon him, judging him, and finding him wanting. The mere contemplation of undertaking anything remotely unconventional, anything that might attract attention, would plunge him into a vortex of anxiety. Even the simplest of actions, such as donning a subtly unconventional t-shirt, felt fraught with monumental risk. One fateful day, Garrett reached his limit. He resolved to confront this fear head-on. He decided to embark upon what, for him, represented the ultimate act of public self-consciousness. He would stand on a bustling street corner and distribute flyers for a cause he fervently believed in, a cause that, to many, might appear rather unconventional, such as advocating for the Earth's flatness. Now, before you succumb to your own judgmental impulses regarding Garrett's chosen advocacy, recall the essence of not giving a fuck. It pertains to internal liberation, not necessarily to universal agreement with every creed. The prospect of standing there, a sheaf of papers in hand, inviting strangers to engage with him, and potentially facing derision or dismissal, was profoundly daunting. His mind conjured a cascade of dire outcomes: people guffawing, ignoring him, branding him insane. He envisioned the spotlight descending, illuminating his every awkward gesture, his every fumbled attempt to articulate his flyer's message. He felt the familiar knot of apprehension tighten in his gut. However, Garrett, armed with a nascent comprehension of the spotlight effect, resolved to persevere. He understood, at least intellectually, that the majority of passers-by would not pause, point, and whisper about him. Their focus would be directed toward their destinations, their own introspective thoughts, their own pressing concerns. Thus, he drew a deep, steadying breath, stepped onto the sidewalk, and commenced distributing his flyers. And what transpired? A considerable number of individuals bypassed him. Some politely declined. A few exhibited curiosity and posed questions. And yes, a handful likely perceived him as eccentric. Yet, the world did not cease to spin, the heavens did not collapse. And the intense, debilitating scrutiny he had so dreaded? It was present, but it was manageable. It was his fear amplified, not a universal condemnation. This modest act, this deliberate confrontation with the fear of public perception, began to erode the illusion for Garrett. He discovered that the imagined audience within his mind was far more critical than the actual individuals he encountered. He began to recognize that the discomfort of potential embarrassment was transient, while the liberation of acting in defiance of that discomfort was enduring. He came to understand that not giving a fuck was not synonymous with indifference to the world, but rather with the judicious selection of what truly merits one's concern, and the dawning realization that many of the matters we believe demand our attention, such as the ephemeral opinions of strangers, are frequently unworthy of the energy expended. The analytical questions we must pose to ourselves are pivotal in this context. What are the precise cognitive patterns that ensnare us in this cyclical trap of the spotlight effect and social anxiety? They are the cognitive distortions, the mind reading "they think I am unintelligent," the fortune telling I am destined to fail, that catastrophizing "should I err, my life will be irrevocably ruined." These are the internal narratives that forge a self-fulfilling prophecy of judgment. We anticipate judgment, and consequently, we behave in ways that render us vulnerable, which then leads us to perceive judgment, thereby reinforcing the initial conviction. It is a pernicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Beyond the abstract conceptualization, what are the concrete, quotidian scenarios in which this phenomenon powerfully sabotages our freedom? It manifests in the job interview where you downplay your accomplishments, fearing the perception of arrogance. It is present in the creative endeavor you abandon, apprehensive that your efforts will be met with disapproval. It resides in the authentic conversation you avoid, preoccupied with the dread of uttering an inappropriate remark. It is the genuine connection you forfeit, too engrossed in managing your public image. This is not to advocate for rudeness or an obliviousness to social cues, that is a separate discourse. This pertains to the debilitating fear of imagined disapproval, which inhibits us from living with unbridled authenticity. It is the distinction between recognizing that one should not shout fire in a crowded theater, genuine social awareness, and being paralyzed by the fear of voicing a dissenting opinion in a meeting for dread of being disliked, spotlight effect, and social anxiety. Acknowledging that the spotlight we perceive is largely a fabrication of our own anxious imagination constitutes the crucial initial step. However, comprehension represents only half the battle. The true mastery lies in actively dismantling this illusion, not solely within the confines of our minds, but through our actions. The subsequent phase involves exploring how we can consciously extricate ourselves from that perceived spotlight, even when the prospect evokes profound disquiet, and thereby embrace the liberation that lies beyond the precipice of embarrassment. 3. Authenticity over performance. We expend an inordinate amount of energy contorting ourselves into shapes we believe others desire. We fabricate personas, we stage elaborate performances. It is it not, an utterly draining enterprise? Reflect upon it. Each day unfolds as a grand theatrical production, whether we acknowledge the spotlight or not. Our objective: to elicit applause from the audience, a vast assembly ranging from our superiors to our acquaintances, even the transient figures encountered in the mundane aisles of a grocery store. We are consumed by the specter of their judgment should we falter, utter an ill-chosen word, or fail to embody the meticulously constructed image we believe they anticipate. This relentless charade is fueled by a corrosive apprehension, the dread of repudiation, the gnawing sense of inadequacy. It is, in essence, a profound psychological entanglement. This incessant compulsion to perform stands in stark opposition to the principle of not giving a damn. It is, in fact, an overinvestment of our emotional and mental faculties, a desperate attempt to manipulate the utterly uncontrollable, the subjective opinions of others. Their thoughts are beyond our dominion. Their affinity for us is not ours to command. We cannot dictate their judgment of our attire, our pronouncements, or our missteps. Yet we persist. We painstakingly sculpt our discourse, obsess over our outward presentation, and meticulously curate our digital footprints, all in a futile pursuit of that elusive golden ticket of affirmation. It is akin to engaging in a game with perpetually shifting rules, officiated by referees secretly harboring envy. We find ourselves on a treadmill, expending immense effort, yet making no discernible progress. The resultant stress is overwhelming. We exist in a perpetual state of hypervigilance, a constant anxiety that the mask we wear may slip, revealing a self deemed unworthy. This unceasing vigilance, this mental contortionism aimed at appeasing every conceivable observer, is a direct conduit to profound disquiet. So consumed are we by the performance that our own internal monologue becomes inaudible, let alone the capacity to savor the unfolding tapestry of our own existence. Now, let us turn our attention to the realm of human connection. When we inhabit this state of perpetual performance, our relationships become as precarious as a house of cards. We are not forging genuine bonds. We are seeking validation for the spectacle we present. This cultivates a pervasive sense of isolation, even amidst a throng of people. Or, let us be candid, how can anyone truly perceive or cherish us if we consistently withhold our authentic selves? We are paralyzed by the fear of being discovered. What if they discern that our intellect is not as profound as we project? What if they unearth our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, or simply our moments of unvarnished ordinariness? This apprehension renders genuine relaxation and profound vulnerability unattainable. Every exchange becomes a perilous tightrope walk, each interaction a potential precipice. True intimacy, the kind that nourishes the very soul, is predicated on candor. It demands that we present ourselves as we are, with all our inherent messiness and resplendent imperfections. When the performance ceases, when the desperate need to impress begins to wane, a remarkable transformation occurs. We commence to attract individuals who are genuinely drawn to us. Not the polished, filtered, applause-seeking simulacrum, but the authentic, occasionally awkward, frequently brilliant, and perpetually evolving individual. This is the profound liberation that unfurls when the burden of performance is shed. The embrace of authenticity is the courageous, and often daunting, act of simply inhabiting one's true self. It is the declarative statement, "This is who I am. Accept or reject." And in making that choice, when we decree that our own truth holds greater significance than the ephemeral approval of others, a colossal weight is lifted. The ceaseless self-scrutiny, the relentless people-pleasing, the mental expenditure dedicated to anticipating judgment, all of it dissipates. It is akin to silencing a deafening alarm that has been blaring in our consciousness for years. Let us be unequivocally clear. Authenticity does not grant license for unbridled boorishness. It does not permit rudeness, inconsideration, or the disregard for the sentiments of others. That is not authenticity. That is mere vulgarity. Genuine authenticity is rooted in an honest reckoning with oneself and a transparent articulation to others of our values, our convictions, our aspirations, and our limitations. It is the practice of navigating life in accordance with our internal compass, even when its bearing deviates from the popular path. When we cease to perform, we are, in essence, cultivating the art of disengaging from the need for external approbation. We are prioritizing our internal landscape over the clamor of the external world. Now, let us be forthright. The adoption of authenticity may initially evoke profound discomfort. It can even feel downright terrifying. We may encounter pockets of transient disapproval. Some individuals may not comprehend. Some may even withdraw. This is the crucible where the not giving a damn muscle is rigorously tested. It is akin to stepping into the bracing chill of winter for the first time. A shiver courses through us, a primal urge to retreat indoors. Yet we intuitively grasp that prolonged exposure will eventually lead to acclimatization. This discomfort, this initial wave of potential mortification or rejection, serves as a form of psychological exposure therapy for the soul. We confront our deepest fears of non-acceptance, and we emerge intact. We affirm our own resilience. Consider the alternative. A life steeped in pretense, a continuous performance, represents a slow, spirit-crushing attrition. The long-term ramifications of such an existence far eclipse any fleeting awkwardness we might endure by embracing our genuine selves. The reward for embracing authenticity, for finally relinquishing the need for external acclaim, is immeasurable. It is the reward of unadulterated freedom. It is the profound serenity that arises from the knowledge that one is living a life aligned with one's truest nature. It is the capacity to forge deep, resonant connections with individuals who perceive and cherish us for who we authentically are. It is the quiet assurance that springs from self-acceptance rather than from the precarious foundation of external validation. The cost of authenticity is a brief, intense period of confronting our fears. The reward for not giving a damn about that transient discomfort is a lifetime of genuine liberation. So, how does this all connect to the fundamental psychological mechanism underpinning performance? At its core, the imperative to perform is an elaborate defensive stratagem. It is our psyche's attempts to shield us from perceived threats, chief among them the threat of social ostracization. We are inherently social beings, and the fear of being cast out has been a survival imperative for millennia. Our contemporary milieu, with its relentless social comparison, a testament to the omnipresence of social media, and often superficial interactions, amplifies this ancient dread. We fall prey to the mistaken belief that if we can just garner sufficient approval, sufficient admiration, we will attain security, happiness, and intrinsic worth. This, however, represents a fundamental misapprehension of human psychology. True security and worthiness emanate from within, not from the capricious whims of others. The mechanism of performance is, in essence, a perpetual, high-stakes gamble. We wager our peace of mind, our vitality, and our authenticity on the outcome of a contest we can never truly win. Every approving glance, every compliment, is a transient surge of dopamine, a fleeting reassurance that we are navigating the path correctly. Yet, the underlying anxiety persists, always lurking, poised for the next potential misstep. This is precisely why performance stands as the antithesis of not giving a damn. Not giving a damn signifies the recognition that this gamble is inherently rigged, that the house invariably triumphs when one adheres to its rules. It means withdrawing from the table. It signifies the understanding that the sole validation that truly matters is one's own, and that external validation serves, at best, as a fleeting diversion. Now, let us delve into the second analytical point. How does the choice of authenticity, even when it pretends potential embarrassment or disapproval, forge a more robust and resilient sense of self, thereby diminishing the necessity to give a damn in the future? This is where the profound paradox of vulnerability truly illuminates itself. When you elect to be authentic, you are, in essence, declaring to yourself, I am willing to be seen, even if it means I might be judged. This act of courage, of intentionally stepping into the luminary sphere of your own truth, is profoundly empowering. Each instance you undertake this and realize that the world has not imploded, that the heavens have not fallen, and that you remain standing, perhaps even experiencing a peculiar sense of relief, you cultivate a formidable internal reservoir of strength. You learn that you possess the capacity to withstand disapproval, that you can endure the dislike of some individuals. This fundamentally reshapes your relationship with fear. Consider it akin to the development of a muscle. If you consistently lift nothing heavier than a feather, your musculature will remain feeble. However, by progressively engaging with greater resistance, even when it proves challenging and occasionally painful, your muscles invariably strengthen. Your sense of self operates on a parallel trajectory. When you perpetually perform, you are, in effect, outsourcing your inherent strength. You rely on external accolades to sustain your sense of well-being. But when you embrace authenticity, you are undertaking the internal exertion. You are substantiating for yourself that your worth is not contingent upon external factors. You are the font of your own fortitude. This process of embracing vulnerability and authenticity constitutes a profound act of self-validation. It is you affirming your own intrinsic value. And as you engage in this practice, the opinions of others gradually lose their sting. You may still find criticism or rejection disagreeable, but the paralyzing terror associated with it begins to dissipate. You come to understand that it is a reaction, an opinion, and not an irrefutable verdict on your entire being. This comprehension fosters resilience. You become less susceptible to damage. The incessant pursuit of approval, the desperate urge to perform, begins to recede because you have already convinced yourself that you are sufficient, precisely as you are. You have cultivated an internal locus of control. The more you practice authenticity, the less compelled you are to give a damn about the perceptions of others, for you have already bestowed upon yourself the most crucial damn of all, the one that affirms, I accept myself. This is the true liberation, the internal freedom that the art of not giving a damn promises. It is not about cultivating indifference to the world, but about cultivating indifference to the world's judgments, thereby enabling you to finally inhabit a life that is unequivocally your own. The passage from the taxing theater of performance to the liberating stage of authenticity is not a passive transition. It necessitates a conscious resolve to cease valuing the applause of strangers and, instead, to attune oneself to the quiet, persistent whisper of one's own truth. This internal metamorphosis, this deliberate act of not giving a damn about external validation, represents the inaugural stride toward a comprehensive understanding of the art of living unfettered. Yet, understanding constitutes merely the genesis. The subsequent, indispensable phase involves actively embodying this freedom, testing its inherent boundaries, and uncovering the profound potency that resides within the embrace of imperfection. 4. Embracing failure and vulnerability. We are indoctrinated from childhood to perceive failure as an adversary, a source of shame. Society champions triumphs, perfect scores, and unblemished performances, thereby conditioning us to dread missteps. This fear fosters a corrosive belief that falling short renders us inherently less. This pervasive dread constructs an invisible, formidable barrier, paralyzing us before we even commence. Yet, the stark, beautiful reality is that mastery is unattainable without first enduring profound ineptitude. Consider it. No one ascends to virtuoso guitarist on their inaugural attempt. No one graces a basketball court and sinks every shot without 1,000 preceding misses. No one crafts a literary masterpiece on their maiden voyage. This is simply not the trajectory of skill acquisition. Every individual you hold in esteem for their prowess, their talent, their success, navigated a period of being spectacularly, undeniably awful. They all faltered, they all stumbled, they all appeared utterly foolish. The true impediment is not the failure itself, but our response to it. We encounter that initial awkwardness, that fumbled endeavor, and immediately cast ourselves as failures. We internalized, "See? I always knew I couldn't. I'm simply not cut out for this." And then we cease. We retreat. We capitulate to the dread of being terrible. This is precisely where the art of indifference becomes your potent weapon. It is the profound understanding that these nascent stages of inadequacy are not a signal to abandon ship. They are the indispensable, non-negotiable prerequisites for even a modicum of competence. Envision someone aspiring to breakdance. They witness dancers performing with breathtaking fluidity, executing intricate moves with impossible grace. Their internal monologue declares, "I could never achieve that." What they fail to perceive are the decades of scraped knees, bruised egos, and countless hours spent resembling a flailing infant attempting to evade an arachnid. Their initial attempt at a basic freeze might more closely resemble an unbidden bodily collapse. A spin could result in dizzy disorientation on the floor. Laughter from onlookers might ensue. Their inner critic would likely shriek, "You look ridiculous." If they succumb to the weight of that judgment, if they are overly concerned with their friends' opinions or the taunts of their inner voice, they will abandon the pursuit. They will conclude breakdancing is not their forte. However, if they begin to cultivate the art of indifference, they will recognize that appearing absurd is an intrinsic component of the process. They will grasp that the laughter, the dizziness, the awkwardness, these are merely data points. They are feedback. They are the universe offering gentle correction. All right, that particular approach wasn't optimal. Try this instead. When you relinquish the compulsion for immediate perfection, you grant yourself the license to falter. Within this liberation resides an extraordinary sense of freedom. You are empowered to experiment. You are at liberty to play. You can fall and rise without your entire self-worth disintegrating. You come to realize that most individuals are too preoccupied with their own mortifying moments to afford yours significant scrutiny. They are too absorbed in their own attempts to appear graceful to truly dissect your clumsy efforts. This is the essence of transcending the spotlight effect, that persistent sensation of being perpetually observed, judged, and scrutinized for every imperfection. The reality is, the vast majority are ensconced in their own personal spotlights, fixated on their own perceived shortcomings. Therefore, the initial stride toward genuinely embracing failure involves a fundamental reframing. It is not a terminal point. It is not a pronouncement on your inherent value. It is a navigational marker. It is an instructor. It is a mandatory respite on the path to proficiency. When you perceive failure not as a catastrophe, but as an unavoidable, even beneficial, element of the learning continuum, you have already achieved a significant victory. You are no longer paralyzed by its prospect. You are actively prepared for it, and perhaps, just perhaps, you may even cultivate an appreciation for its lessons. This naturally leads us to the domain of vulnerability. If failure is the absence of success, then vulnerability is the act of being exposed in that state of not succeeding, or when we are simply less than perfect. We have been conditioned to believe that revealing our imperfections, our doubts, our fears, signifies weakness. We erect carefully constructed facades, polished exteriors to shield ourselves from judgment. Our aspiration is to perpetually project an image of strength, confidence, and control. However, this incessant performance is profoundly draining. It is akin to perpetually wearing a suit of armor. It is cumbersome, restrictive, and erects an insurmountable barrier to genuine connection. And here's the crucial point: the more assiduously you endeavor to conceal your imperfections, the more acutely you dread their discovery. This dread of exposure, this terror of being perceived as flawed, is the very mechanism that perpetuates our entrapment. Vulnerability, conversely, is the audacious act of embracing imperfection. It is the willingness to present oneself and be seen, even with the full awareness of one's fallibility. It is the admission of uncertainty. It is the courage to solicit assistance. It is the disclosure of an error. It is the permission granted for another to witness your unvarnished, unedited, imperfect self. Consider the individual paralyzed by the apprehension of speaking in a meeting. They possess a valuable idea, a critical insight, yet remain silent, fearing their inquiry might be perceived as unintelligent or their suggestion summarily dismissed. They prioritize the avoidance of potential embarrassment over the opportunity to contribute and perhaps even excel. They are investing an exorbitant amount of emotional currency in the opinions of their colleagues. Now, imagine that same individual deciding to embrace vulnerability. They might experience a tremor of anxiety, their palms might grow clammy, but they proceed to speak nonetheless. They raise their hand and articulate, "I have a question regarding this specific point. I'm not entirely certain I grasp it, and I was hoping for some clarification." Or, "I have a concept that might seem unconventional, but I wanted to share it on the off chance it proves valuable." This is the essence of vulnerability. It is not a plea for commiseration or attention. It is the recognition of our shared humanity, of the inherent imperfection that defines us. It is the understanding that the risk of judgment pales in comparison to the certainty of regret, and the perpetual, gnawing anxiety of maintaining a disingenuous facade. The transcript references the distribution of controversial flyers, a salient illustration of calculated vulnerability. Imagine holding a fervent conviction, a political stance, or championing a social cause you deeply believe in, and you are distributing flyers to disseminate your message. You anticipate some individuals will disregard your efforts. Some will react with revulsion. Some may even exhibit incivility. You are placing yourself in a position of exposure, inviting potential rejection and disapproval. If you were to invest a substantial amount of emotional energy in such potential negativity, you would never distribute a single flyer. You would remain ensconced in the sanctuary of your home, a protective bubble where judgment cannot penetrate. However, if you are actively cultivating indifference, you comprehend that this is the inherent cost of engagement. You accept that some individuals will not approve. You acknowledge that some will dissent. Yet, you also recognize that the act of advocating for your beliefs, of disseminating your message, transcends the fear of negative repercussions. Your motivation is not predicated on their endorsement, it is driven by its intrinsic significance to you. When you consciously choose vulnerability, you begin to erode the pervasive influence of the spotlight effect. You discover that the world does not cease its rotation when you err. The heavens do not collapse when you encounter disagreement. In fact, something remarkable transpires when you cease to be beholden to the opinions of others. You begin to experience a taste of true liberation, internal freedom. This brings us to the dichotomy of the performance trap versus the liberation of authenticity. We expend a considerable portion of our existence performing. We perform for our superiors, for our partners, for our families, for our friends, and even for the ephemeral audience of the digital realm. We meticulously curate our lives, presenting only the highlight reel, the filtered moments, the carefully constructed persona. We are akin to actors perpetually on stage, terrified of forgetting our lines or revealing the disarray backstage. This performance is fueled by the insatiable desire for external validation. We crave admiration, acceptance, and approval. However, this approach is fundamentally flawed, as it is predicated on a fabrication. You are striving to embody a persona that is not your own, an aspiration that is inherently unsustainable. Inevitably, you will falter. You will utter an ill-chosen word. You will betray a flaw. And when this occurs, the dread of being discovered becomes an unbearable burden. This performance guarantees eventual rejection, as the audience is not connecting with the genuine you, but with a character you have meticulously crafted. The alternative is authenticity. This entails presenting yourself as you are, complete with your idiosyncrasies, your strengths, your vulnerabilities, and your glorious imperfections. It signifies the acceptance that not everyone will find you agreeable, and that this is perfectly acceptable. It means understanding that your inherent worth is not derived from universal approbation, but from an unwavering fidelity to your true self. When you elect authenticity, your objective is not to persuade anyone of anything. You are simply being, and within this state of being, you discover a profound sense of tranquility. You can engage with others on a genuine, unadulterated level. You can forge authentic connections, as individuals are connecting with the actual you, not a meticulously engineered facade. And if someone does not align with the authentic you, you can release them. You are not invested in their approval. You have relinquished the need for their validation because you have already affirmed yourself. This is precisely what transpired with Garrett, the aspiring breakdancer. Initially, his focus was likely on performance. He yearned to impress, to project an image of coolness. He was preoccupied with his appearance, his movements, and the perceptions of others. He was ensnared in the performance. However, as he began to embrace the awkwardness, to accept the inevitable stumbles, to expose his vulnerability in his clumsy attempts, a transformation occurred. He ceased to be overly concerned with appearing proficient and instead prioritized the process of learning. He began to derive pleasure from the movement itself, from the challenge, from the incremental victories of mastering a new step. He experienced, for the first time, the exquisite internal freedom that accompanies a lack of excessive concern. This is not an endorsement of rudeness or indifference. It is a conscious decision regarding the allocation of your finite mental and emotional resources. It is the realization that the majority of your anxieties, the opinions of others, the prospect of failure, the fear of embarrassment, are not deserving of the energy you are expending upon them. Therefore, how do we address those more probing analytical inquiries? What is the specific psychological mechanism that renders us so intensely fearful of failure and vulnerability? And how does this fear directly contravene the realities of personal growth and achievement? The profound dread of failure and vulnerability is deeply embedded in our evolutionary heritage and our societal conditioning. Psychologically, it originates from a fundamental imperative for belonging and acceptance. For our early human ancestors, ostracization from the collective frequently signified demise. Consequently, we are predisposed to seek approval and avert rejection. Socially, we are inundated with messages that conflate success with intrinsic worth. Media, educational institutions, and even familial structures often emphasize accomplishment and penalize missteps. This cultivates an internal narrative wherein failure is construed as a personal deficiency, a marker of inadequacy, rather than an inherent aspect of the human experience. This fear is illogical, as it presumes external judgment to be definitive and that a solitary failure irrevocably defines our entire being. In reality, growth and achievement are constructed upon a bedrock of trial and error. Every skill, every innovation, every piece of knowledge we possess is underpinned by a history of mistakes, miscalculations, and learning curves. Paradoxically, the fear of failure impedes the very growth and achievement we aspire to, trapping us in a state of inertia and apprehension. It is analogous to harboring a phobia of moisture, leading to an outright refusal to approach bodies of water, thereby guaranteeing an inability to learn to swim. How does the deliberate seeking out and embracing of situations that elicit mild embarrassment or perceived failure cultivate resilience and desensitize us to the fear of judgment, ultimately fostering greater freedom? The intentional exposure to these discomforting circumstances functions as a form of psychological inoculation. When you deliberately place yourself in Chapter 2, Path to Personal Freedom. 1. Internal freedom and self-acceptance. We dedicate so much of our existence to the pursuit of external favor, to earning nods of approval, to being told, yes, that person has it figured out. It feels as if we are perpetually auditioning for roles to which we were never truly cast, relentlessly refining our dialogue and our attire based on what we perceive the audience desires. This ravenous hunger for validation from without? It is a gilded cage, a vast, fetid, spirit-sapping prison that forfeits our liberty. Consider this: why do we stifle our genuine thoughts? Why do we don garments that feel alien? Why do we feign enthusiasm for that which we loathe? Because we are paralyzed by the specter of authenticity. We envision a chorus of condemnation, an inundation of judgment descending upon us. This is the spectacle of external approval in its most grotesque manifestation. And the spotlight effect is a masterclass in this very illusion. We enter a space, convinced that every eye is fixed upon us, dissecting our every gesture, our every imperfection, our every hesitant silence. We fancy ourselves the protagonists in everyone else's narrative, meticulously observed and critiqued. The unvarnished truth? Most individuals are so consumed by their own existences, their own anxieties, their own internal dramas, that they barely register our presence, let alone scrutinize it. They are not witnessing your misstep on the pavement. They are preoccupied with the possibility of their own stumble. They are not dissecting your slightly boisterous laughter. They are wrestling with the memory of whether they secured their vehicle. We are not the fulcrum of the universe, despite the insistent whisperings of our apprehension. This ceaseless recalibration to an imagined audience is an exhausting endeavor. It is akin to running a marathon daily, with no discernible finish line, for the finish line itself is perpetually receding, dictated by the capricious whims of those who are not even paying heed. The psychological toll? A gnawing anxiety, a pervasive self-doubt, missed opportunities, and the insidious conviction that one is perpetually falling short. It is the slow, inexorable erosion of the soul. It is here that the profound power of not giving a damn begins to reveal itself. This is not an invitation to callousness or indifference. It is the discerning recognition that the myriad concerns we deem paramount, the pronouncements of strangers, the ephemeral judgments of acquaintances, the dread of appearing foolish, are, in essence, mere static. They are distractions from that which truly resonates. By consciously electing to withhold our precious cognitive and emotional resources from these trivialities, we begin to reclaim our internal dominion. But here lies the pivotal element, the key that truly unlocks this interior liberation. One cannot simply resolve to cease caring and expect it to endure without a robust bedrock of self-acceptance. This is the fundamental ground upon which true freedom is built. Genuine internal liberation is not constructed upon a bulwark of external affirmation, It is forged in the quiet, unshakable understanding that one is inherently sufficient, precisely as one is. Self-acceptance is not an exercise in self-aggrandizement or the proclamation of flawlessness. Far from it. It is the act of gazing into the mirror at one's own intricate, imperfect, and occasionally mortifying self and articulating, "Yes, this is me. I possess imperfections. I have erred. I am not always poised. And that is perfectly acceptable." It is the profound exhalation after years of held breath, awaiting a license to simply exist. It is the dawning realization that one's worth is not a commodity to be bartered through performance or acclaim. It is an inherent birthright. Imagine the process of learning a new, intricate skill. Recall that acquaintance, let us call her Clara, who embarked on such a journey. She did not achieve immediate mastery. She faltered, repeatedly. Her early attempts were clumsy, even comical. Yet, Clara possessed an invaluable asset, a willingness to embrace her ineptitude. She welcomed the awkwardness. She found humor in her struggles. She remained unperturbed by the observation of onlookers. Her pursuit was not for them, it was intrinsically for herself. This readiness to be unapologetically unskilled is a potent act of self-acceptance. It liberates one from the crushing imperative to perpetually present a polished, impressive facade. It frees one to truly learn, to truly evolve, for the fear of appearing foolish no longer eclipses the learning process. It is the indispensable precursor to eventual proficiency and, more crucially, to unadulterated joy. When we embrace ourselves, the compulsion to perform recedes. We are all, to some degree, actors inhabiting various roles in our daily lives. We don the guise of the competent professional, the charismatic friend, the responsible adult. These personas are instrumental in navigating the social landscape, but when we begin to conflate these masks with our true selves, we sever our connection to our authentic being. This engenders an internal schism, a persistent dissonance between our presented selves and our actual selves. It is akin to donning armor that is excessively constricting. It impedes movement and renders each breath a laborious struggle. The liberation that blossoms from self-acceptance is the courage to shed these artifices. It is the fortitude to present oneself as the genuine article, even if that authenticity does not resonate with every individual. This does not equate to rudeness or inconsideration. It signifies a cessation of contorting oneself into forms that we presume will garner admiration. It means engaging in discourse without the gnawing apprehension that one's perspective might alienate others. It means admitting ignorance without succumbing to the sensation of utter inadequacy. This authenticity fosters deeper, more meaningful connections, for individuals are engaging with the true you, not a meticulously curated facsimile. And most significantly, it cultivates a more robust, more resilient sense of self. So, how does one actively nurture this self-acceptance, particularly when the past is replete with regrettable episodes? It is a continuous practice, not a static destination. One of the most potent methodologies involves the conscious reframing of one's internal monologue. Instead of castigating oneself for an error, inquire, "What valuable lesson can I glean from this?" Rather than dwelling on a perceived deficiency, ask, "How can I extend greater kindness to myself in this precise moment?" It is a transition from a punitive, judgmental mindset to one of compassionate mentorship. Consider the narrative of Julian. Julian was an exceptionally gifted programmer, yet he had endured years in professional environments where his insights were frequently disregarded or appropriated. He harbored a profound and persistent fear of inadequacy, a conviction that his contributions held no weight. This instilled in him a reticence to articulate his ideas, to embrace risks, even to pursue more advantageous employment. He was ensnared in a vortex of self-doubt, perpetually fueled by prior setbacks. One day, Julian reached a breaking point. He commenced by acknowledging the emotional residue of those past experiences. He did not attempt to feign a lack of emotional impact. However, he then began to analyze them not as definitive evidence of his failures, but as formative experiences that had imparted crucial knowledge. He learned to identify detrimental professional settings. He learned what approaches to eschew. He learned to place greater trust in his own intuition, even if it had not always yielded optimal outcomes. He initiated a journal not as a repository of his shortcomings, but as a chronicle of his emergent understandings. He would inscribe entries such as, "That project I mishandled underscored the imperative of meticulous code verification prior to submission," or "The supervisor who dismissed my proposal demonstrated precisely the kind of leadership I aspire to transcend." This deliberate reframing profoundly altered his perspective. He was not a failure, he was a student of life's intricate curriculum. He began to perceive his imperfections not as immutable flaws, but as fertile ground for development. He recognized that every individual, irrespective of their outward success, possesses a history of stumbles. The distinguishing factor lies in their capacity to integrate these missteps into their personal chronicle. Julian commenced the practice of self-compassion. When the familiar tremor of apprehension preceded a presentation, he would gently remind himself, "It is entirely permissible to experience nervousness. I have prepared diligently and I shall endeavor to perform to the best of my ability. If it falls short of perfection, that is acceptable. I shall learn from the experience." This was not an instantaneous transformation. It was a daily and at times hourly commitment. Yet, with each conscious act of self-kindness, each reframed setback, Julian was incrementally dismantling the edifice of self-doubt, laying the foundation for genuine internal liberation. This internal freedom, once nurtured, radically reconfigures our capacity for not giving a damn. It evolves from a defensive posture against the world into a proactive strategy for authentic living. When you embrace yourself, you apprehend that the opinions of others are precisely that, opinions. They are not immutable truths. They are not accurate reflections of your intrinsic value. They are merely data points, and you possess the agency to determine which data points hold relevance in your life. Envision yourself at a social gathering. You deliver a jest that elicits no mirth. In the past, this might have plunged you into a maelstrom of mortification, prompting an overwhelming desire to vanish. However, now, with self-acceptance as your protective shield, you can acknowledge the situation with equanimity. Very well, that witticism did not land. My timing was perhaps off, or it simply lacked inherent humor. No matter. You can then gracefully transition, engage in another conversation, or even venture another attempt at humor, unburdened by the crippling dread of past failure. You have effectively not given a damn about the unsuccessful jest, because you have accepted that your intrinsic worth is not contingent upon your comedic timing. This is the very essence of internal freedom. It is the quiet assurance that empowers vulnerability without compromising resilience. It is the profound understanding that genuine strength emanates from within, not from the ephemeral adulation of the masses. When you cease your desperate quest for external validation, you liberate yourself to pursue that which genuinely ignites your spirit, to embrace calculated risks, to immerse yourself in your passions, and to construct a life that is unequivocally your own. You transcend the role of a marionette dancing to the strings of external expectations and assume the mantle of the conductor orchestrating the symphony of your own existence. The ability to not give a damn serves as the crucial key that unlocks this inner sanctum, but self-acceptance is the robust portal that permits entry and establishes it as home. Without it, the portal remains sealed, leaving you exposed to the biting winds of hypothetical scenarios and the incessant whispers of others' perceptions. 2. Overcoming societal pressures. We navigate a world saturated with whispers and often shouts, dictating how we ought to exist. It prescribes our careers, dictates the vehicles we should drive, the aesthetic of our homes, and even the emotions we're expected to feel about our own bodies. This ubiquitous, invisible rulebook, which most of us unconsciously adhere to, is the pervasive force of societal pressure. From our earliest years, we are subtly steered. Be a doctor or be an engineer, we're told. secure a stable, respectable profession. This pressure to conform to a singular definition of success becomes one of our heaviest burdens. It extends beyond careers, permeating our relationships. We are inundated with messages that marriage by a certain age is imperative, that children are a necessity, or that friendships must conform to a prescribed mold. Failing to meet these perceived milestones can foster a profound sense of inadequacy, a feeling of being somehow diminished. Then there is the relentless bombardment of idealized beauty and fitness standards propagated by magazines, social media, and television. Falling short of these unattainable ideals can breed self-doubt, fostering the insidious belief that something is fundamentally amiss within us. These are not benign suggestions. They are potent forces shaping our desires, anxieties, and our very perception of self-worth. They become so normalized, so deeply ingrained, that we often mistake them for our own genuine aspirations, when in reality, they are mere echoes of external expectations. Why do we become so ensnared by these external dictates? A significant driver is our deep-seated fear of judgment. We dread being perceived as peculiar, as failures, or as simply not belonging. This is where the concept of the spotlight effect resurfaces, a truly transformative notion. Imagine stumbling on the sidewalk. You might feel as though every eye is upon you, every person pointing and snickering. Your mind conjures an immense, imaginary spotlight under which you are exposed. Yet, the reality is that most individuals are preoccupied with their own potential stumbles, their own embarrassing moments, their own pressing to-do lists. They are immersed in their own lives, their own dramas, their own internal narratives. You are not the protagonist of their universe. You are merely a fleeting figure in the periphery of their personal films. This intense fear of judgment is often a phantom, a specter haunting our minds because we overestimate the attention others bestow upon us. We construct elaborate fortresses of worry, convinced the world scrutinizes our every move, poised for our missteps, when in truth, most people are simply navigating their own days. This illusion of constant scrutiny is a powerful societal mechanism, effectively keeping us within prescribed boundaries, instilling a fear of deviation from the accepted path, lest we incur the imagined disapproval of an unseen audience. This relentless pursuit of external validation ensnares us in a cycle of performance. We feel perpetually on stage, endeavoring to enact a role that garners applause. We present a facade of resilience, concealing our struggles, feigning composure even as we crumble internally. This is not living, it is acting. And acting, let me assure you, is profoundly exhausting. It depletes our energy, erodes our sense of self, and renders genuine connection nearly unattainable. How can anyone truly know or love you if you are perpetually presenting a meticulously curated version of yourself? This performance trap prevents us from embodying our authenticity, from being real. It is akin to wearing a mask for so long that we forget the contours of our own face. When consumed by the apprehension of others' opinions, you are not inhabiting your life. You are striving to appease an audience that is likely not even watching. This fosters a profound well of self-doubt and a diminished trust in our own judgment, as we have been conditioned to believe that validation must originate externally. The antidote to this performance trap lies in the embrace of authenticity. It signifies a bold declaration. This is me, imperfections and all. It entails accepting our eccentricities, our missteps, our messy realities. When you relinquish the pretense of being someone you are not, and instead wholeheartedly embrace your true self, a remarkable transformation occurs. You begin to feel a palpable lightness. You can breathe freely. You may not elicit applause from everyone, but those who do connect with you will perceive your genuine essence, and those connections will be deeper, more robust, and immeasurably more meaningful. Authentic living is not about achieving perfection. It is about embodying reality. It is about acknowledging that you will falter, you will err, and that this is perfectly acceptable. It is about understanding that true self-esteem is not derived from external affirmation, but from internal acceptance. This transition from performing to simply being is the cornerstone of liberation, empowering you to forge relationships grounded in truth, rather than artifice, and to finally find solace within your own skin. This is where the concept of being unapologetically bad emerges with profound potency. Our culture venerates success and the illusion of perfection. We are indoctrinated to strive for the pinnacle, to be the best, and to meticulously conceal our failures. But what if we disrupted this narrative? What if we embraced the notion that it is permissible to be a novice, to be clumsy, to be demonstrably inept at something new? Envision someone aspiring to learn breakdancing. They might feel compelled to perform with astonishing skill from the outset, to flawlessly execute every move. However, if they possess a resolute indifference to immediate proficiency, they can simply revel in the experience. They can tumble onto their posterior, laugh it off, and try again. The joy emanates from the movement, the learning, the sheer act of participation. They are not preoccupied with impressing anyone. They are simply savoring the process. This willingness to be unapologetically bad directly challenges the societal emphasis on outcomes and flawless execution. It dismantles the imperative for external validation, as the reward is intrinsically derived, the experience itself. By embracing this messy, imperfect journey, you liberate yourself from the tyranny of failure and unlock a universe of possibilities. You can explore new avocations, acquire novel skills, and delve into diverse facets of your being without the crushing burden of immediate expertise. It champions the value of the journey, the learning, and the growth over the mere final product. This cognitive recalibration is essential, enabling experimentation, calculated risks, and the discovery of latent passions, unburdened by the paralyzing dread of inadequacy. Ultimately, transcending these relentless societal pressures converges on a singular principle: conscious volition. It is about awakening to the realization that you possess the agency to determine what genuinely holds significance for you. This is not an act of gratuitous rebellion. It is a strategic prioritization of your own well-being and your authentic self. You are empowered to scrutinize all those expectations, all those shoulds and musts, and pose the question: does this align with who I am and what I aspire to? If the answer is a resounding no, then you are free to consciously choose disengagement. This is where not giving a fuck transforms into a potent instrument of liberation, not in a careless or discourteous manner, but as a deliberate act of reclaiming your mental and emotional reserves. You are not obligated to imbue every opinion, every trend, or every societal milestone that fails to resonate with your inner truth with significance. You determine where your precious attention and energy are invested. This involves establishing boundaries, not solely with others, but with yourself. It is the recognition that your life is yours to inhabit, not a performance for an audience. Allow me to share the story of my friend, Sarah. Sarah was a gifted graphic designer, yet she felt an overwhelming pressure to ascend the corporate hierarchy. Her parents anticipated her securing a lucrative position at a prestigious firm. Her peers were all transitioning into managerial roles, and social media teemed with images of accomplished professionals in opulent offices. Sarah began to feel like a failure because she derived contentment from working at a small, independent design studio, which offered greater creative autonomy but diminished professional cachet. The pressure intensified. She would lie awake at night, tormented by the thought, "What will people say? They'll brand me lazy or lacking ambition." She even commenced applying for positions she disdained merely to feel as though she were keeping pace. Her anxiety reached its zenith, and her passion for design began to wane. One evening, as she confided in me, tears welled in her eyes. She articulated an overwhelming sensation of entrapment. I gently inquired, "Sarah, what do you truly desire? Set aside external influences for a moment. What ignites your spirit and brings you fulfillment?" She paused, engaged in profound introspection, and then articulated, "I cherish the creative process. I relish collaborating intimately with clients to manifest their visions. I have no inclination to manage others, My passion lies in crafting beautiful creations. The corporate milieu feels so crushing to me." That moment marked a pivotal turning point. She comprehended that the pressure she experienced did not stem from a genuine aspiration to become a corporate executive. Rather, it originated from her apprehension of disappointing others and her own internalized conceptions of what success ought to entail. Consequently, she made a deliberate choice. She resolved to not give a fuck about the corporate ladder. She ceased perusing LinkedIn updates regarding promotions, muted acquaintances who exclusively discussed their career advancements, and politely deflected conversations centered on her career progression. Initially, it was not effortless. Moments of doubt invariably arose. Her parents expressed bewilderment, and some acquaintances regarded her with skepticism. Yet, Sarah remained resolute. She channeled her energies into her work at the small studio, reinvested her passion into her craft, and discovered profound satisfaction in the projects she undertook. She began to experience a sense of lightness, a greater measure of happiness, and a more profound connection to her true self than she had in years. Her anxiety about disappointing others gradually dissipated, supplanted by a quiet self-assurance derived from living in accordance with her own deeply held values. She discovered that by consciously selecting what held importance, she had liberated herself from an edifice of expectations. She was not exhibiting rudeness or dismissiveness. She was simply prioritizing her own mental and emotional equilibrium. She grasped that her personal definition of success was valid, even if it diverged from the societal template she had been presented with. This act of internal liberation enabled her to flourish, not in defiance of societal pressures, but by consciously choosing to transcend their influence. So, how can you practically discern which societal pressures are genuinely impeding your personal liberty versus those that might be constructive or neutral? It is akin to assuming the role of a detective of your own psyche. Begin by observing what evokes feelings of anxiety, guilt, or inadequacy within you. When that knot of unease forms in your stomach, inquire, is this sensation arising from a genuine concern for my well-being, or is it a reaction to what I perceive others expect or would judge? For instance, if you experience guilt about neglecting exercise, is it because you genuinely aspire to feel more robust and energetic, constructive, or is it a consequence of feeling ashamed when confronted with the impeccably sculpted physique showcased on Instagram? Societal pressure? Another effective method involves interrogating the ubiquitous shoulds. Whenever you catch yourself articulating, "I should be doing X," or "I should feel Y," pause and pose the question, says who? Is this a universal decree, or is it a rule concocted by another? Frequently, these shoulds are inextricably linked to external expectations. If you feel you should be married by now, ask yourself for the underlying rationale. Is it because you genuinely yearn for companionship and partnership, or because this is the milestone that others appear to be achieving, and you harbor a fear of being left behind? This differentiation necessitates candid self-examination and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about your intrinsic motivations. It is about disentangling your authentic desires from the cacophony of external conditioning. This process is not about repudiating all counsel or external input. It is about discerning which inputs foster your growth and which merely serve to maintain your confinement. Beyond mere apathy, what active strategies and shifts in mindset are requisite to consistently not give a fuck about detrimental societal pressures, particularly when confronted with social disapproval or ostracization? This is not about cultivating an impenetrable demeanor overnight. It is about fostering intrinsic resilience. One of the most profound. 3. Growth through vulnerability. We often mistake freedom for unbridled license, the ability to act on every whim at any moment. Yet, true liberation, the kind that liberates us from the shackles of anxiety and self-doubt, lies not in the absence of constraint, but in the deliberate redirection of our focus. It is about diminishing our concern for the inconsequential. And among these trivialities, The most pervasive is the phantom gaze of others. We navigate our days as if perpetually on a stage, bathed in an all-consuming spotlight, with an unseen audience dissecting our every gesture. This is the insidious spotlight effect, a profound inhibitor of our spirit. It fosters a paralyzing fear of venturing forth, of articulating our thoughts, of simply inhabiting our own skin, all because we are consumed by the imagined opinions of those around us. The irony, however, is that most individuals are too engrossed in their own performances to truly observe yours. They are ensnared in their own mental theaters, preoccupied with what you might be thinking of them. This creates a dizzying cycle of mutual, imagined scrutiny. To break free from this cycle, to truly cultivate a disengagement from external validation, we must confront the very thing we most dread: vulnerability. Vulnerability, at first blush, might suggest weakness, a concession of defeat. Yet it is precisely the opposite. It is the zenith of courage. Consider this: the spotlight effect flourishes in the fertile ground of our apprehension. It whispers that perfection is paramount, that flaws must be concealed, that a constant charade is required. This relentless performance is utterly exhausting, breeding a pervasive sense of imposture. But what transpires when we consciously step from the shadows into the glare, aware that we might falter? What unfolds when we willingly embrace the possibility of being perceived as imperfect, as awkward, even as somewhat absurd? Herein lies the genesis of true liberation from the tyranny of caring. When we deliberately place ourselves in scenarios where embarrassment is a palpable risk, we are not merely testing our limits. We are actively dismantling the dominion that the fear of judgment wields over us. Envision Garrett, a man crippled by the dread of appearing peculiar. He meticulously policed every utterance, every sartorial choice, terrified of standing out. Then he embarked on a profoundly eccentric endeavor. He began distributing flyers proclaiming the earth to be flat. A ludicrous proposition, he knew, one that would invite derision and dismissal. He anticipated mockery, and predictably, he received it. Some ignored him, others chuckled, a few even engaged in debate. Yet, the heavens did not collapse. The world continued its rotation, and Garrett, standing amidst his absurd pamphlets, felt lighter. Why lighter? Because he had confronted his most formidable fear head-on. He had presented himself as demonstrably flawed, as undeniably odd, and the world had not imploded. He discovered that the spectral audience within his mind was infinitely more severe than the tangible individuals he encountered. By choosing vulnerability, by embracing the potential for humiliation, he diminished the spotlight's power. He learned that most people are too preoccupied with their own internal dramas to give serious consideration to his flat earth evangelism. This experience did not transform him into a flat earther. It liberated him from the debilitating craving for approval. He grasped that not giving a fuck is not an embrace of apathy, but a strategic allocation of one's finite mental and emotional resources, and expending them on the anxieties of Brenda from accounting's opinion of your slightly boisterous laugh. That represents a monumental squandering of energy. This concept of leveraging embarrassment as a catalyst for growth is paramount. We are innately conditioned to shun it at all costs, perceiving it as a mark of failure, a testament to our inadequacy. But what if embarrassment is, in fact, evidence of our endeavor? What if it is proof that we are venturing beyond our comfort zones, the very crucible where genuine development occurs? Consider the acquisition of a new skill, like breakdancing. Recall Garrett's initial attempt. He was abysmal, utterly devoid of grace. His movements were rigid, his rhythm non-existent, and he likely resembled a bewildered automaton attempting to escape a malfunctioning appliance. He felt the searing sting of embarrassment with every flailing limb. Yet he persisted. He did not falter because he was incompetent. He did not surrender because he recognized his own comical appearance. And therein lies the crux. Rather than interpreting embarrassment as a signal to retreat, we can begin to regard it as a badge of honor. It signifies that you are pushing your boundaries. It indicates that you are immersed in the arduous, uncomfortable process of learning. When you are learning to breakdance and you tumble to the floor, that is not a failure. That is feedback. It is the universe communicating, very well, that particular maneuver was less than optimal. Attempt an alternative. If your apprehension about appearing foolish prevents you from even initiating the attempt, you will remain perpetually unlearned. You will be confined to your cozy, predictable enclosure, forever denied the exhilarating satisfaction of mastering something new. The paradigm shift is profound. As you begin to embrace embarrassment, you commence to understand that the majority of people are not actively seeking out your missteps for the purpose of judgment. In reality, they are often tacitly cheering you on, or, more accurately, they are simply not paying that much attention. Those few who do offer harsh criticism, their pronouncements are typically rooted in their own internal deficiencies, rather than any objective assessment of your character. By actively seeking out or passively accepting situations where embarrassment is a distinct possibility, you are, in essence, exercising your fuck-giving muscle. You are cultivating resilience. You are proving to yourself that you can endure awkwardness, that you can recover from a social misstep, and that these moments, while uncomfortable, are not catastrophic. This process diminishes the perceived threat of social disapproval until it becomes a mere whisper rather than a deafening roar. This brings us to the dichotomy of the performance trap versus the authenticity advantage. The vast majority of us expend a prodigious amount of energy attempting to embody personas other than our own. We meticulously curate our digital footprints. We artfully construct our dialogues. We adorn ourselves in attire we believe enhances our appearance even if it induces discomfort, all in a concerted effort to present a polished, socially palatable version of ourselves. This is the essence of performance. It is akin to being an actor on an unending stage, perpetually plagued by the fear of forgetting one's lines, or missing a crucial cue. It is utterly debilitating and profoundly alienating. In our fervent attempts to conform to what we perceive as others' desires, we sever our connection to our authentic selves. Authenticity, conversely, stands in direct opposition to performance. It is the act of presenting oneself as one truly is, imperfections and all. It entails articulating one's thoughts with candor even if the phrasing is less than artful. It involves admitting ignorance when it exists. It means accepting that not everyone will hold you in high esteem. And yes, it undeniably necessitates vulnerability. When you are authentic, you expose yourself to the risk of rejection. You risk others perceiving the less polished facets of your being, those aspects you have diligently sought to conceal. But herein lies the undeniable upside. When you are authentic, you attract genuine connection. Those who remain by your side, who appreciate you, do so because they recognize the genuine article, not the painstakingly constructed artifice. This cultivates deeper, more meaningful relationships. And within the sanctuary of those relationships, you can finally cease performing. You can relinquish the burden of giving a fuck about maintaining a facade. You can simply exist. Consider your most cherished companions. Do you hold them dear because they are paragons of perfection? Or because they are genuine? You likely cherish their idiosyncrasies, their occasional lapses into silliness, their forthright opinions, even when they verge on bluntness. You do not require them to be someone they are not. And therein lies the power of authenticity. When you extend this same genuineness to others, you create fertile ground for such connections. It involves a trade-off. You may forfeit a measure of superficial admirers, but you gain the profound satisfaction of being truly seen and accepted. This, in turn, diminishes your reliance on external validation from strangers or acquaintances, thereby liberating additional mental bandwidth. You are no longer beholden to the capricious whims of your spectral audience. So, how does all of this culminate in internal freedom and the ultimate state of non-fuckery? The objective of not giving a fuck is not to transform into an unfeeling automaton. It is to attain a state of profound internal liberation. And this freedom is not forged by erecting formidable barriers around ourselves to shield us from the external world. It is constructed by systematically dismantling those barriers, stone by stone. Vulnerability serves as the demolition crew. When we embrace vulnerability, we expose those aspects of ourselves that we believe render us weak or unworthy. We reveal our insecurities, our past transgressions, our deepest fears. And in doing so, we uncover a remarkable truth. These elements do not define us. They do not diminish our inherent worth. In fact, by bringing them into the light, we often realize they are not as formidable as our imaginations had painted them. Their potency wanes. We learn that we can possess flaws and still be valuable. We can be imperfect and still be loved. This process of self-acceptance, born directly from the act of being vulnerable, forms the bedrock of genuine internal freedom. When you cease to be overly concerned with the opinions of others, you begin to live for yourself. Your decisions are guided by your own values and aspirations, not by the imagined approval of external sources. You pursue passions that might appear eccentric to outsiders. You articulate your truth even when it is unpopular. This is the zero fucks zone we aspire to, not a realm of indifference, but a zone of deliberate focus and self-possession. Garrett's journey exemplifies this perfectly. He commenced by undertaking an act he recognized as absurd, an act that invited judgment. But in doing so, he learned that the judgment was not fatal. He discovered that he could endure it. This paved the way for him to cease fretting over others' perceptions of his career choices, his hobbies, his life. He began to live more authentically, more freely, because he had confronted his dread of being judged and discovered it to be far less terrifying than he had constructed it to be. The analytical questions we must confront are vital in this context. How does the active pursuit of vulnerability directly counteract the fear of external judgment and the spotlight effect? It is akin to inoculating oneself against an illness. If you live in perpetual fear of succumbing to sickness, you will adopt a life of extreme caution, thereby forfeiting the full spectrum of life's offerings. However, if you deliberately expose yourself to a mild, controlled strain of the ailment, your body develops immunity. Similarly, by intentionally placing yourself in uncomfortable, conspicuous situations, like Garrett with his flyers or someone else opting for karaoke despite a demonstrably poor singing voice, or posing a seemingly foolish question in a meeting, you are not merely confronting your fear, you are actively recalibrating your perception of social risk. You are proving to your own mind, through direct experience, that the sky does not fall. You are learning that the sting of embarrassment is transient and survivable. With each instance, the power of that imagined spotlight diminishes. It is not about evading the spotlight. It is about realizing you can radiate just as brightly, or at the very least, exist comfortably, even when you are not perfectly illuminated. And what are the psychological mechanisms at play when we begin to embrace embarrassment as a marker of progress? It represents a fundamental reframing. Instead of perceiving embarrassment as an indicator of inadequacy, we commence to view it as evidence of courage and effort. It becomes a signifier of engagement with life. The shame that might have once compelled us to retreat into obscurity is transformed. It ceases to be a source of profound personal failure and becomes instead a temporary discomfort that signals our ongoing process of learning, adaptation, and evolution. This transformation is integral to not giving a fuck. It means that even when we encounter something that would have previously plunged us into a vortex of self-recrimination, we can now process it differently. We can acknowledge the discomfort, glean insights from it, and move forward without allowing it to undermine our self-worth. It is akin to converting a potential poison into a potent elixir for personal growth. Finally, within the intricate tapestry of relationships, what are the tangible advantages of selecting vulnerability and authenticity over performance? When you cease to perform, you abandon the endeavor to impress. You abandon the pursuit of being the flawless partner, the impeccable friend, the exemplary employee. Instead, you present yourself as you truly are. 4. Achieving personal liberation. We spend so much of our lives treading on eggshells, paralyzed by the phantom specter of others' opinions. We meticulously curate our words, artfully adjust our actions, and perpetually contort ourselves into an imagined mold, believing it the sole key to acceptance. It is an exhausting charade, is it not? A ceaseless performance upon an invisible stage, convinced that every soul in the unseen audience scrutinizes, judges, and awaits our inevitable misstep. This, my friends, is the insidious illusion of external scrutiny, a self-constructed prison. Consider this. Have you ever entered a room and felt an immediate, suffocating spotlight of attention? Perhaps a fleeting thought of a reversed shirt or a clumsy entrance. Your mind, in an instant, conjures a symphony of whispers and stifled laughter. Yet, here lies the stark, beautiful truth. The vast majority of people are not fixated on you. They are ensnared by the labyrinth of their own minds, preoccupied with their own lives, their own careers, their own mortifying blunders from earlier that day. Psychologists aptly term this the spotlight effect. We possess a profound tendency to overestimate the noticeability of our actions and appearances. While you may perceive the world as an unwavering observer of your every move, the reality is that most individuals are merely navigating their own day, striving to avoid their own stumbles. They are oblivious to your slightly askew tie or the minor coffee mishap. Their mental landscape is occupied by more pressing concerns: the forgotten grocery item, the email's reception by their superior. This dawning realization is the first fissure in the edifice of self-imposed anxiety. The cosmos is not a grand amphitheater where you are the sole, vulnerable performer under a harsh glare. It is, rather, a bustling bazaar where each individual is absorbed in their own pursuits. In the grand tapestry of public perception, your significance is far more modest than your anxious psyche would have you believe. This is the very essence of not giving a fuck. The profound understanding that most people are not preoccupied with you, and those who might be are likely too consumed by their own affairs to elevate it to a significant concern. If we truly internalize the fact that most individuals are immersed in their own distinct realities, then the sting of potential embarrassment loses its venom. The unvarnished truth is that we often harbor a more profound dread of public mortification than of virtually any other conceivable outcome. Individuals have confessed a preference for death over delivering a eulogy at a funeral. It is a profoundly unsettling notion when one contemplates it. We would rather confront the eternal void than risk a momentary stumble in our articulation before a handful of onlookers. This fear of appearing foolish, of becoming the subject of derision, stands as a colossal impediment to living with uninhibited freedom. But herein lies the secret alchemy. The more you cultivate a capacity to tolerate embarrassment, the less dominion it wields over you. It is akin to building physical fortitude. Strength is not forged by avoiding the gymnasium. It is attained by engaging with the weights, even when the exertion is challenging. Similarly, the fear of embarrassment is not conquered by a retreat. It is overcome by direct confrontation, even in measured, controlled increments. Consider the act of embarking on something novel, an endeavor where initial ineptitude is a virtual certainty. Perhaps it is the art of dance, the thrill of karaoke, or the dexterity of juggling. The specter of awkwardness, the inevitability of mistakes, is what deters the majority. But what if, in this very moment, you resolved to embrace that very awkwardness? What if you ventured to that karaoke bar and unleashed a song, unburdened by perfect pitch, yet brimming with unbridled passion? What if you enrolled in that introductory dance class, fully aware that your feet would likely betray you? This is not an endorsement of gratuitous self-inflicted folly for the sake of attention. It is an understanding that the fear of embarrassment often surpasses the actual lived experience. By granting yourself permission to be imperfect, to err, to embrace the beginner's journey, you actively dismantle the power of external judgment. You demonstrate to yourself that you can endure a degree of awkwardness. Indeed, you might even discover a measure of unexpected delight. Garrett, for instance, once chose to distribute flyers for the Flat Earth Society in a bustling urban square. Imagine the gazes he attracted, the suppressed snickers, the bewildered stares. Yet, by undertaking this act, by confronting that wave of potential ridicule head-on, he eroded his own apprehension. Each flyer distributed, each peculiar glance received, represented a minuscule triumph against the tyranny of external validation. His objective was not to convert anyone to a particular cosmology, it was to cultivate an indifference to the opinions of others regarding his unconventional pursuit. This willingness to inhabit discomfort, to feel the telltale flush creep up one's neck, is fundamental to the philosophy of not giving a damn. It is the practical embodiment of the understanding that most people are indifferent, and those who might harbor an opinion are merely expressing their own subjective viewpoint. This brings us to the very crux of the matter, the transition from a performance paradigm to an authenticity paradigm. For the majority of our existence, we operate as players on a grand stage, perpetually striving for an unblemished performance. We fret over uttering the correct phrase, executing the appropriate action, projecting the desired image. We yearn for the applause, the affirmation, the favorable critiques from our unseen audience. This performance-centric existence is a guaranteed pathway to perpetual anxiety, for regardless of your proficiency, there will invariably be those who find your act disagreeable. Ultimately, you are destined for rejection, as your perceived worth is tethered to an external, inherently volatile foundation. But what transpires when you dismount the stage and elect to simply be? What unfolds when you embrace your authentic self, with all its inherent idiosyncrasies? This is the crucible where genuine liberation ignites. Authenticity signifies presenting yourself without apology. It means articulating your truth, even when it deviates from the prevailing sentiment. It entails pursuing that which genuinely captivates you, irrespective of external definitions of success. When you inhabit your life with authenticity, you cease performing for external validation. You operate from a wellspring of internal affirmation. You are no longer languishing in anticipation of others' selection. You are actively choosing yourself. This paradigm shift is nothing short of revolutionary. It means that when someone disapproves of you or disagrees with your perspective, it does not precipitate the unraveling of your world. It simply signifies a lack of compatibility, and that is perfectly acceptable. Indeed, it is more than acceptable, it is salubrious. When you are authentic, you draw to yourself individuals who genuinely appreciate your true nature. These are the relationships that possess depth, forged not from a meticulously constructed facade, but from genuine connection. Reflect upon it. Would you prefer 100 acquaintances who tolerate your performance, or 5 steadfast companions who cherish your unvarnished, imperfect, authentic self? The choice becomes resoundingly clear when you cease performing and commence living. This internal validation serves as the bedrock of personal liberation. It signifies that your sense of worth emanates from within rather than from the capricious pronouncements of others. Now, let us delve into a concept that may initially seem unconventional, yet is profoundly liberating: the courage to be demonstrably inept. We exist within a cultural milieu that lionizes mastery and achievement. From our formative years, we are indoctrinated to aspire to excellence, to be the very best. This pervasive pressure can be utterly paralyzing. It instills within us a fear of venturing into new territories, driven by a profound apprehension of failing miserably. We opt to remain within the comfortable confines of our known competencies, our established strengths, rather than risk the mortification of being a complete novice. Yet, here lies a fundamental verity: it is impossible to attain proficiency without first enduring a period of utter inadequacy. Every singular expert, every revered master, every brilliant intellect commenced their journey from the nascent stages. They were awkward, uncoordinated, and committed a multitude of errors. The divergence between their trajectory and that of the majority lies in their willingness to embrace that initial incompetence. They comprehended that the pathway to competence, to skill, to mastery, is paved with unapologetic ineptitude. Therefore, here lies your imperative. Identify an endeavor that has long beckoned you, yet has been consistently thwarted by the fear of your own inadequacy. Perhaps it is the acquisition of a musical instrument, the crafting of a narrative, or the pursuit of a new athletic discipline. Whatever it may be, commit yourself to being profoundly terrible at it for an extended period. Cast aside concerns about producing mellifluous tones, composing eloquent prose, or executing flawless performances. Simply engage. Revel in the fumbles, the discordant notes, the stumbling sentences. Discover joy in the very process of learning, in the unadulterated act of attempting. Garrett, for instance, resolved to learn breakdancing in his late 20s. He was abysmal, utterly and unequivocally awful. His movements were stiff, his coordination non-existent, resembling a malfunctioning automaton attempting to extricate itself from an assembly line. Yet, he persisted. He remained unperturbed by the opinions of younger, more adept dancers. He discovered a profound, internal liberation in the sheer act of moving his body, in assimilating new choreography, in the unadulterated pleasure of it, divorced from any consideration of his skill level. He was not performing for an audience. He was embarking on an exploration of a previously uncharted facet of himself. Life, in its truest essence, rewards those who possess the fortitude to embrace risk, to endure embarrassment, and to confront failure. By granting yourself permission to be inept, you are not merely acquiring a new skill, you are cultivating resilience, fostering bravery, and developing an unwavering trust in your own intrinsic process. You are constructing the inner fortitude that arises from the profound realization that you can confront imperfection and emerge not unscathed but unburdened. Finally, there exists a beautiful, almost transcendent dimension to personal liberation, the moral obligation to disseminate it. Once you have embarked on the dismantling of the fortifications of external validation and self-doubt, once you have savored that exhilarating taste of authentic living, you will apprehend something of profound significance. You will recognize that a multitude of individuals remain ensnared within those very same cages. And you are presented with the choice. You can hoard your newfound freedom, or you can extend it as a beacon of possibility. This is not about proselytizing or coercing others into adopting your convictions. It is about embodying your truth with such vibrancy, such unreserved conviction, that it compels others to question their own self-imposed limitations. When individuals witness you navigating life guided by your intrinsic values, a life where you are uninhibited by the fear of being your genuine self, it plants a seed of potential within their minds. They may begin to ponder, could I achieve such a state as well? Your self-assurance, your willingness to embrace imperfection, your capacity to navigate life's currents without perpetually soliciting approval, these are potent endowments. It evolves, in a sense, into a moral imperative to assist others in transcending their own imagined constraints, not through didactic pronouncements, but by illuminating the vast landscape of what is achievable. This shared liberation engenders a cascade effect, a movement toward a world imbued with greater authenticity and courage, one unburdened mind at a time. Having commenced the arduous task of dismantling the external pressures and internal anxieties that have held us captive, we now stand at the threshold of unadulterated self-expression. The subsequent step transcends mere indifference. It involves the deliberate selection of what truly resonates, and the channeling of this newfound liberty into a life imbued with purpose and profound fulfillment. This ushers us into the pivotal practice of defining our core values and aligning our actions with them, a journey we shall embark upon in the subsequent exploration, titled Living Your Unapologetic Truth. Conclusion: you have arrived. You have navigated the mire, confronted unflinching truths, and perhaps even ventured into territory that sent tremors of fear through your very core. Take a moment, a deep, satisfying breath, and acknowledge your triumph, you magnificent, anxious creature. The promise held within these pages has always been deceptively simple, yet profoundly transformative. Genuine liberation from the insidious gnawing of worry and the paralyzing grip of self-doubt arises not from an intensified effort to appease every soul, but from a deliberate, conscious decision to cease caring about their perceptions. This is not a manifesto for becoming a stoic, unfeeling automaton. Far from it. It is an exhortation to wield your finite mental and emotional currency with discerning wisdom. Consider it thus. Your daily allocation of fucks is a limited resource. Would you truly squander it on whether Brenda from accounting registered your resonant sneeze, or if an anonymous passerby judged the cut of your attire? It is about discerning what genuinely merits your attention, your ardor, your, as you've undoubtedly surmised, fucks. This conclusion is not an endpoint, it is the very ignition of a life intentionally lived on your own sovereign terms. Recall the profound insight offered by David Foster Wallace. You will stop worrying so much what other people think about you when you realize how seldom they do. This is not mere aphoristic flair, it is the very cornerstone of a life characterized by a judiciously curtailed expenditure of one's fucks. The vast majority of us navigate existence under the pervasive illusion of being perpetually under a glaring spotlight, each gesture dissected by an unseen, judgmental tribunal. This is the spotlight effect, and it is a colossal deception. Individuals are far too preoccupied with their own internal dramas to fixate on yours. And what of the specter of embarrassment? We have examined the case of Garrett, who boldly distributed pamphlets advocating flat earth theories, or attempted a spectacularly ungraceful break-dancing routine. The world did not implode. His social standing did not crumble into dust. He endured, and more critically, he discovered that the sting of humiliation is ephemeral and often considerably less agonizing than the perpetual anxiety of its avoidance. Herein lies the crucial distinction between performance and authenticity. The relentless pursuit of an idealized self, the desperate attempt to embody what you perceive others desire, is a guaranteed pathway to profound unhappiness. Authenticity, even in its most awkward and unvarnished manifestations, is the fertile ground where true connection and enduring peace are cultivated. Furthermore, let us not overlook the exhilarating liberation that unfurls when one becomes profoundly at ease with one's own ineptitude. You are not obligated to achieve virtuosity in every endeavor. Embracing your magnificent imperfections, your moments of unapologetically bad, is an act of unparalleled emancipation. As these principles become deeply ingrained, you will begin to construct what we may term your zero fucks zone. This is that hallowed internal sanctuary where the pronouncements of others forfeit their dominion. It is not an invitation to rudeness or obliviousness. Rather, it is a recognition that your intrinsic worth is not contingent upon external validation. And here resides a startling revelation. As your concern diminishes, you paradoxically become inspiring. Your personal liberation can possess a remarkable contagion. Contemplate Garrett's audacious skydiving escapade, clad in a chicken suit. It was preposterous, terrifying, and a defiant leap beyond his comfort parameters. Yet, the sheer audacity of it, the willingness to confront that dread head-on, that is the very essence of this transformative journey. These challenges, these precipices of near panic, are not mere spectacles. They are profound opportunities to unearth latent fears, yes, but also to discover untapped reservoirs of resilience you never knew you possessed. But here lies the essential truth. Achieving this zero fucks zone is not akin to earning a diploma. It is a continuous, moment-by-moment practice. It is a way of life. You will need to persistently recalibrate the destination of your fucks. When that familiar knot of apprehension tightens, fueled by the specter of another's opinion, perceive it as your signal. It is your cue to engage in practice. Pose the question, does this truly hold significance for me? If the answer is a resounding no, then release it. Loosen your mental grip. And when you succeed, even in the most minor of victories, disregarding a trivial slight, or articulating your truth without prior Authorization celebrate it. I acknowledge your triumph. The ultimate reward for this unwavering dedication? A life that resonates with greater authenticity, a more vibrant existence, and a profound depth of fulfillment. Life is fleeting. Indeed, it is alarmingly, breathtakingly brief. We are all destined for mortality, and the clock is relentlessly ticking. Do not squander another precious instant imprisoned within the confines of another's expectations. You possess the power, in this very moment, to determine what truly matters. You hold the agency to direct the allocation of your fucks. Therefore, venture forth, embrace your glorious, imperfect, and gloriously messy self, and forge a life where apprehension has no dominion. Offer the most resounding, the most defiant fuck